The Minnesota Vikings defeated the Green Bay Packers to move to 500 for the season after starting the year 0-3, and they are now on a 3-game winning streak. But it comes at a cost. Potentially the Minnesota Vikings 2023-2024 season.
We're not goons. We're not bullies. No matter what people say or do, we have to be ourselves. You.
Guy Germain,
From where?
St. Paul, Minnesota.
Les Averman, Brooklyn Park, Minnesota.
Charlie Conway, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
And I'm Gordon Bombay, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Minnesota! From the lakes of Minnesota.
Kirk Cousins was injured late against the Green Bay Packers in the Vikings 24-10 win. And there's lots of takeaways in this game because there's a lot of good things to discuss from the Minnesota Vikings, including defensively, including Jordan Addison's spectacular day, and so much more. But Kirk Cousins going down with an injury is the biggest topic of discussion. And even though the Minnesota Vikings won this game, all reports coming out of Green Bay was that players weren't acting like it was a victory. Harrison Smith, after the victory, said, "We are thankful for a win for sure, but not a normal 3-game win streak vibe, I would say." Garrett Bradbury on playing without Kirk Cousins. It was just weird. Whenever the Vikings are out there, Kirk is out there. Brian O'Neill on Cousins. He lives and breathes being durable and out there and available for us. It's surprising and it hurts. People don't understand how much he means to us. TJ Hawkins on Kirk Cousins. There's nothing really I can say about it. I just love Kirk to death. I love his family. I love him. I love everything about him. To see a guy like that go down is always tough. The Minnesota Vikings locker room was torn to pieces because when you think about it, they're not just losing their starting quarterback. They're not just losing Kirk Cousins, was voted team captain by every single player on the team besides himself. Kirk has become a leader. He has become a friend. And he has become the hope for the Minnesota Vikings season. Justin Jefferson goes out with a hamstring injury. And as valuable as Justin Jefferson is, and he also is going to come back this year, you didn't see these locker room quotes after the Minnesota Vikings game when he got hurt. It was a terrible injury. Nothing that nobody would wish on anybody for a superstar wide receiver. But the quarterback means more to a team than the wide receiver does. And after a 3-game win streak, Kirk Cousins pops his Achilles, and you can see it from the word go. You pull up that instant replay, and it didn't take a Twitter doctor to analyze what happened. You could see that calf reverberate from Minnesota on instant replay. It was clear. He couldn't put no pressure on it. And now Kirk Cousins' future with the Minnesota Vikings is in jeopardy. Because where do the Minnesota Vikings go from here? That's another podcast. But what this means, and this is my biggest takeaway, is because Kirk Cousins is consistent. You know exactly what performance you're going to get out of him every single week. He's going to work hard. He's going to make good throws. He's going to take care of the football most of the time. He'll throw a pick here and there, but he's going to be consistent. He's going to be reliable. He's going to show up every single Sunday, and he's going to perform. Kirk Cousins, and I'm not blaming anybody for this, could not be fully appreciated by the Minnesota Vikings players, by the Minnesota Vikings fan base, by the Minnesota Vikings coaches, front office, and ownership. he could not be fully appreciated because he was always out there. We took Kirk Cousins and his ability to play every single Sunday and perform at a high level in jeopardy for granted. We took Kirk Cousins for granted. Why? Because we always expected him to be out there. Kirk is like life. Everyone takes life for granted until a close loved one dies. And then everyone posts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram pictures of their loved one. And it says, don't take life for granted. Life is short. Couple weeks, couple months, couple years pass by. You start taking life for granted again until another loved one dies. And then the posts come back. Don't take life for granted. We took Kirk Cousins and his ability to play every single Sunday for granted. I mean, look at this statistic. Bill Barnwell tweeted this out today. Kirk Cousins hasn't even been on the injury report since week 1 of the 2013 season. Scary sign that he was ruled out so quickly with that ankle and foot injury. The Minnesota Vikings season is in jeopardy. I mean, their backs are now as far against the wall as you could think. The Vikings lose Justin Jefferson, best wide receiver in football, and you still think the Vikings could squeak out some wins. But they lose Kirk Cousins, and the season's over, barring some miracle. And the Vikings come up or are now in the easiest part of their schedule. That's what he means to this franchise. That's what he means to this team. It's amazing to me how two quarterbacks can have the same play, the same formation, the same wide receivers, the same offensive linemen, the same amount of time, the same routes, and see two completely different things. It's amazing to me that like Patrick Mahomes can see things that Kirk Cousins can't, or that Kirk Cousins can see things that Jaron Hall can't. Because it's the same play, it's the same formation, it's the same route. But anticipation is different, feel is different, control is different, ability is different. And the Vikings just lost their top 10 NFL quarterback. And I tweeted this like 10 minutes before Kirk Cousins got injured. I said that we are seeing a confident Kirk Cousins these past 2 weeks. He was unleashing the ball and anticipating throws before he got hit, as he was getting hit. And then he blows his Achilles a few plays later. Last year, in the second half of the season, we saw a completely different Kirk Cousins. Kirk was wheeling and dealing. He was anticipating. He was a gunslinger at times. And we were starting to see this gunslinger mentality come out again this year after Justin Jefferson got hurt, and he had nothing to do except to be a gunslinger. That was the Vikings' only chance. And Kirk played unbelievable against the 49ers. And when he got hurt against the Packers, he was 23 for 31, 274 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Not only was Kirk efficient, but he was throwing the ball down the field. He wasn't dinking and dunking. His quarterback rating was 122.2. He was shredding the strength of the Green Bay Packers, their defense. And now Minnesota Vikings fans, Minnesota Vikings players, the coaches, the front office, ownership, one player goes down, and you can just feel the season slipping away. I thought it was slipping away when the Vikings were 0-3, but somehow they turned around this ship. They're 500. They're 2-0 in the division. They got an easy schedule coming up, and you feel like the season's over. And you're wondering what the Vikings are going to do next. Like, how and what decisions are O'Connell and Kwesi going to make following Kirk Cousins' injury? All eyeballs, all national eyeballs, are going to be on the Minnesota Vikings decision this week. Are they going to sign a quarterback like Colt McCoy, who they worked out a few weeks ago? Are they going to trade for Kyler Murray? Are they going to just roll with Jaron Hall and wait till Sean Mannion comes back? Are they going to trade for Andy Dalton? What are the Minnesota Vikings going to do? But that's another podcast for a different day. Let's focus on a couple of other things in this game. Jordan Addison. I mean, need I say more? 7 catches, 82 yards. I saw a tweet come in today, pulling it up right now. The tweet says, Jordan Addison is the first player in Vikings history to record 7 touchdown catches in his first 8 games with the team. This player is insanely good, obviously. Jordan Addison, what he's been able to do in Justin Jefferson's absence has been crucial, obviously, to the Minnesota Vikings 3-game win streak. JJ goes down, the Vikings offense is already struggling, and you're wondering where their offense is going to come from. Well, look no further than Jordan Addison, because he has been spectacular. He has been a number 1 wideout. And I said this last week, but I'm going to say it again. To do this, when you're the focal point of the opposing defense, like when defenses are preparing for the Minnesota Vikings, they're trying to figure out how to slow down Jordan Addison and how to try to slow down TJ Hawkinson. They're not even worried about the running game, because the Minnesota Vikings running game, even though they scored a touchdown today, it stinks. It stinks. Smells like raunchy buttholes. Even though Cam Akers has given the Minnesota Vikings a nice little burst of energy, he still only had 9 carries, 19 yards today. Alexander Madison, 16 carries, 31 yards. They averaged like 2 yards a carry. Stinks. So to be able to do this when the Green Bay defense, they put their best cornerback on Addison, Jair Alexander, who was talking trash about JJ last year, saying how he needs to be matched up to a man-to-man. Well, I saw a lot of man-to-man with Jair Alexander and Addison today, and Addison just torched him. Hawkinson played well. He had like a drop or two. KJ Osborne stepped up big. Brandon Powell went down injured. I don't think he came back in the game, but he's been stepping up too. So the Minnesota Vikings offense and the guys that have stepped up while JJ has been out has been shocking. I don't think anybody expected this. And also, not only was it shocking, but it has been like rejuvenating or like exciting. Like all everyone can talk about right now is what this Minnesota Vikings offense is going to look like when JJ comes back. Because if O'Connell can utilize Addison and JJ to the extent that we believe he can, to get the full potential out of both players, we're looking at the best offense in football. Not even close. I mean, not anymore because Cousins is hurt. But next year, I mean, look out if the Vikings can figure out who their quarterback's going to be. Another takeaway, the Vikings defense. I can't tell if this is a shot at the Green Bay Packers or just so much credit to the Minnesota Vikings, because the Packers offense is awful. I mean, Jordan Love is not the heir to Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. I can tell you that right now. Jordan Love misses receivers wide open. He tucks and runs when he shouldn't. I get that this is only his first year, but you can see glimpses of Favre, glimpses of Rodgers. You see glimpses, you see plays where it's like, okay, this guy's the franchise quarterback. I don't think I saw one glimpse or one play from Jordan Love on Sunday where I was like, this is the guy. Jordan Love reminded me of Christian Ponder. He's staring down receivers, underthrowing guys, overthrowing guys, throwing a left or right of guys. It was just disastrous. And give the Minnesota Vikings defense credit because they played well. Josh Metellus had an amazing interception. Danielle Hunter, what more can you say about him? He got another sack, 10 sacks in 8 games. The Vikings defense played well. Jay Ward, Mr. Offsides on field goal kicks. Maybe take him off the field goal blocking unit because that's going to come back to bite the Minnesota Vikings maybe, and it already did in the first game this season when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers got a first down off his offsides, scored a touchdown, ended up being the difference in the game. But anyway, overall reactions, Kirk Cousins, I feel bad, man. 36, 37 years old, roughly, out for the rest of this year. One thing that I did tweet out because I thought it was funny. I can't wait until all the national media is discussing Kirk Cousins throwing balls on the sidelines in 2 months, aka Aaron Rodgers. Maybe Cousins will get the Aaron Rodgers super secret surgery and be back for the Super Bowl this year when Jaron Hall leads them to the NFC Championship game. Could happen. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Minnesota Tim Podcast. If you haven't yet, check out Hochland Farm. Hochland Farm has rotationally grazed 100% grass-fed Hereford beef. This beef is sold in quarters and halves, and they also have custom sample packs so you can try before you buy. This beef has no medications or antibiotics, and you can come for a visit to know where your beef comes from. 20% off your first order if you tell them you heard about them on the Minnesota Tim Podcast. Hochland Farm. Contact Jared at 952-491-1541. Again, that's 952-491-1541. 20% off your first order if you tell them you heard about him on the Minnesota Tim Podcast. Facebook.com/Hochland Farm for their website. And if you have any questions, HochlandFarm2012@gmail.com. Hochland Farm. Get good beef in your freezers today. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Minnesota Tim Podcast. I appreciate your download and listen. Tell your friends. Please rate, review, share the podcast wherever you're listening. I'd appreciate that. Rate, review. Everyone have a great week. Skol Vikings.